Welcome, everyone, to the Captive Audience. It is the 3rd of June, 2025. And I'm Kevin Horn. I'm here tonight to kind of run through the headlines. And there's been a lot of news. And I know that we've had some encore episodes running lately. So let's get caught up. One of the first stories that stuck out to me here recently, kind of a big one, is that with China, we've got a problem. China has been caught infiltrating our solar energy system here in the United States with stuff they manufactured. And Michael Schellenberger, who's a former liberal Democrat, turned, I think, more like an independent, but he definitely is a critic of what's been happening to our cities in this country. He wrote San Francisco. He also wrote a book about the climate crisis and how he's noticed that it's turned into this scam that's overblown so significantly that you actually, at this point, can't rely on the things that are being said to any great degree. It's called Apocalypse Never. And so, he is an investigative journalist, and he did an interview, a really good one actually, with the Epoch Times about how China has gained control of our solar arrays in this country, and they've done it in such a way that maybe even if we said, okay, no more Chinese equipment in our solar arrays, they actually manufacture the overwhelming percentage of this equipment. So you may not hear that coming from the lips of people who are convinced that the most important thing to do is to make sure that we have renewable energy replacing everything, because they may not care if China is able to do this. And there's talk of the fact that the equipment that was used in Spain may have actually, this might have happened. One of the things that can be done is to cause an overvoltage or a flare that could trigger through the electrical system and short out the whole thing. And there's, as we've talked about on this show before, there's a lot of questions as to why that system went down, and some of the answers have not met with proper scrutiny. Let's put it that way. So, the Democrats are in full gear for the upcoming smoke season. And it's troubling because they're constantly talking about climate change. And they're also talking about how suddenly there's this great danger of being able to fight fires that they refuse to prevent through proper forest management. And so some of the articles that came out last week, hi, Carol. Hi, Lori. Were articles about how they were claiming that there's this unprecedented severe wildfire threat that's coming this summer, even though last year was a record fire season. They're saying it's supposed to be hotter and drier. It's also called summer. And they always seem to leave out the fact that this is an annual occurrence and smoke season happens every year. Well, they're now in the middle of trying to explain to everyone how they're going to blame President Trump for everything that goes wrong in the state of Oregon. Wildfires that have been happening every year that they refuse to prevent. Worse, they not only refuse to prevent them through proper forest management, and as we know, many Democrats are holding up a bill to properly fix our forests, as the bill is called, which several Democrats who voted against it, including Val Hoyle last year, suddenly voted for it earlier this year, virtually the same bill. And they must have learned some lesson from the campaign taught to them by their opponents. And that is certainly what happened with Val Hoyle. But now they're trying to see if they can't gaslight Donald Trump for what's they expect to happen this season. And I just posted a warning from Jeff Merkley, which has almost no counter opinion expressed to what he says. It's just carried on. This is the Lake Oswego Review. He warns of tumultuous fire season amid federal cuts to wildfire support. And he lays out what he believes is the case for this, but the wildfire support has never been adequate and has always been overwhelming the fires that they're meant to deal with. And we saw that in California in spades last year, but it's been true in Oregon for a long time. It is a policy that President Trump is trying to change, as we know, and as we've reported on this show in the past. So take a look at that, because there's something that emerged like a blast from the past. A bunch of Oregon conservation groups are now howling, yes, pun intended, that we need to immediately protect the spotted owl habitat. Now, the spotted owl is the reason why they shut down most of the forest land in the early 90s. And as we know, and as they actually know, the reason why the spotted owl found themselves in this endangered status was not because of logging. It was because of something called the barred owl, Barred, which is a predator that attacks, kills, eats the eggs of, and even mates with the spotted owl. And so, in other words, the spotted owl is like this inferior species to the barred owl, but they want to roll back to reinstate the rollback of the protection for these habitats done by President Trump in his first term. As you know, that didn't really go anywhere while he was not in office, but here we are again talking about the spotted owl. And a guy named Nick Cady, who's the legal director, because all they do is sue. They just sue and they stop everything from happening. And they've sued the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to prevent any logging, which, as we know, is actually absolutely necessary. It's 3.5 million acres of habitat, and it's absolutely necessary in order to manage these forests and thin them out so that they can survive. Last year, in the record fires that took place, the spotted owl and the barred owl and a bunch of other forest creatures are just being burned to a crisp instead of being saved. And now the Trump administration wants to move ahead with actual forest management and logging in these habitats because it's not hurting them. But anyway, these guys suddenly are now trying to invent other reasons. They're saying that they're protecting clean water for millions of people. And claiming that there's no way that you can log anything without damaging the water quality and dramatically increasing sediment. And this is the statewide conservation director for the Bird Alliance of Oregon. These guys have lots of money. They sue all the time. They delay all this stuff. That's why nothing ever gets done. And then they also say that it's very important for tourism to be able to visit old, mature trees, which they claim is what everyone's just going to go and start cutting down everywhere. It's the same old, same old. And when you pair that together with what Jeff Merkley said, we're being set up again to believe that somehow either budget cuts or climate change are both what's causing our forests to burn and not improper forest management. And then we're also being told that we once again have to reserve a bunch of this wild land for the spotted owl. 3.5 million acres is a heck of a lot. And so take a look at this article, because here we go again. Or as Yogi Berra used to say, it's deja vu all over again. In other news, I did want to return to some news at the national level about the Democrats. They seem to be realizing that they have a masculinity problem. And they're going to spend $20 million to study what they are or are not doing properly. 20 million. And, I think that's a lot of money, but it's probably just a small investment since they wasted, I think it was somewhere on the order of $3 billion on Kamala Harris's campaign. And all they did is convince a bunch of young guys and black men in particular that the Democrat Party is not masculine anymore, doesn't have that image. And they're going to figure out how to talk to men again. And they keep marching out Tampon Tim, the vice presidential candidate from last year, to explain to people that they have a problem. He is the problem. It's isn't it Yogi Bear? Or it's Yogi Berra. Anyway, it's the baseball guy, not the cartoon character. No, that's Yogi Bear said, "Hey, boo boo." No, that's a different guy. No, Yogi Berra is the one that's famous for saying these crazy but meaningful sayings like "It's deja vu all over again." Anyway, back to some news about China. It would appear that the Chinese have been that through a series of um, cases that have now been exposed, the Chinese were actually trying to target military installations and steal intellectual property. Yes, Yogi Berra, that's correct. Um, and these students have been caught, and it's a whole series of these cases. And as we know, the Biden administration stopped a program that picnic basket, yep, that were meant to catch and stop all of this espionage going on through our universities in particular. And so take a look at this article because it lays out who some of these folks are that are doing this. And there were two foreign nationals who specifically have been indicted for a plot to smuggle U.S. military technology to China. And so take a look at that too, because the FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, he is off like a rocket, prosecuting these things and getting cases filed, and it's fantastic. But it's two guys. One is 43-year-old guy from China, and then a guy named John Miller, 63-year-old national of the United Kingdom. They were charged with interstate stalking and conspiracy to commit interstate stalking, conspiracy, smuggling, and violations of the Arms Control Export Act. And they actually targeted a U.S. resident who was exercising his constitutional right to free speech and tried to intimidate him. And then they also tried to traffic the sensitive U.S. military technology. I think we'll probably end up arresting just legions of these folks because there's so many of them now, and they're caught up in these plots. Which did I already post that? Sorry if I posted that twice. And we have a long way to go to clean up the mess left over by the Brandon administration. It is a mess. Now, here's a story. Apparently, and this is something to put on your radars, we have heard a lot of vaccine news lately and changes in recommendations about COVID vaccines here in the United States. And probably long overdue because it's really what people are already doing. But schools in China apparently are beginning to isolate students. COVID cases are surging in China, and it's apparently a less severe form, but it has like a sore throat to it. And China's reaction has been to try and shut their society down. Let's be careful about this becoming something that somebody thinks we should do, especially in some blue states here in the U.S. We saw how that went last time. Here's some news about Joe Biden. A Secret Service whistleblower said that Biden actually used to get lost in his closet at the White House. And they're protecting this whistleblower because usually the Secret Service, they're frowned upon um, divulging these things. But this one speaks to whether or not we had a mentally competent commander in chief, which is actually of great interest to all of us and should be of great interest. And so take a look at that, because it is definitely in the public interest whether or not we get to the bottom of this. And James Comer, the congressman who chairs, I believe it's the Oversight Committee in the House, is going to get to the bottom of this, and he should. I think it's absolutely essential. And it's not about politics, because even the Democrats should want to know just how much some of them were deceived by their fellow Democrats and hold those people accountable. Speaking of holding people accountable, particularly Democrats, here in the state of Oregon, there is a bill that is going through the legislature that's meant to limit the number of bills that members of the state house can propose to 25 per lawmaker. Unfortunately, it's actually, because of the ratio of the membership in the state legislature, very likely to produce very inequitable outcomes between the two parties. And yes, I used inequitable in the correct context, not the DEI context. It makes it so that, in essence, the Democrats could get away with as many as 2,500 bills that they could file in a session, while Republicans could only do 900. And the reason why that's even more imbalanced is because the Republican bills almost never get hearings. So the Republicans propose them. They try to get the majority of Democrats who have all the power to give them hearings, and very few get through. Meanwhile, the logjam is really being caused by the Democrats, because they're the ones actually jamming up these committees with bills that actually do get heard, and some of them actually are awful. So even though it's a problem of the legislature's own making, this might not be the right solution. Republicans are speaking out about it. And the minority leader, Christine Drazan, said that the contrast, the numbers are stark. It is not equitable. And Democrat-controlled committees would be able to have 15 bills each, and Democrat statewide elected officials, such as the Secretary of State and Attorney General, would also get 25 bills each. So they're stacking the deck. This is probably not incredibly new, but it's an attack on the Republican Party, is the way Senator David Brock Smith put it. It's House Bill 2006. And so if you thought things are in balance now, just you wait. This is what's going to happen. And this is a system that's broken, but it's broken because the Democrats have made it broken, and they're probably in no position to do a good job of fixing it. I'm jumping around a little bit here, but here's a really good article to take a look at, which is a Mexican attorney has pled guilty to laundering $52.7 million for the Sinaloa cartel. Now, the Sinaloa cartel is noteworthy because that's the one who operates in Oregon and is the biggest one. And there's a lawyer that's finally been caught and brought up on charges in California, who essentially running air traffic control over this, and apparently had nothing to fear for the Biden administration, which makes you wonder who in the Biden administration might have been benefiting from this scheme. It really does make you wonder. It was a long-term FBI investigation, but the case has finally been brought. And they had a whole bunch of shell companies operating in San Diego that they were putting chunks of $200,000 in cash through. Well, this entire drug smuggling and human smuggling system doesn't work unless you make money off of it. They had a cryptocurrency network they set up that the feds have now shut down. They've arrested 11 people on this and seized $3.1 million in illegal assets. But I think we're going to learn a lot more about this going forward. This is part of what's called Operation Take Back America, which, as you can imagine, was not the name of any operation during the Biden administration. It was I think take back was replaced by the F word, because that's what they did. And hopefully we will now be able to turn the tide on this as well. So uh, lots of interesting news. I'm going to continue to run through it here. Democrats have been running around saying that the economy is going badly. And there's a lot of people in the Democrat media that have been doing that, and some in the mainstream and even in right of center media that have been pulling their hair out about the economy, particularly talking about tariffs. Well, as it turns out, here's a trio of stories you should take a look at, because as it looks like from the actual data that's coming in, we're not looking at inflation yet at this point. There's actually been further easing of inflationary pressures. The interest rates remain high, and as we know, a lot of the money that's being spent during the Biden administration has now slowed to a trickle, if that, which has the consequence also they were spending money left and right to get not only to get elected, but then once they looked like they were going to be kicked out of office, they were trying to shovel it to their pals as quickly as they could before they went out the door. Stacey Abrams is a great example of that. But and even when there's been a slight increase in jobless benefits filings, it's still well within the healthy range of employment. Consumer sentiment is also starting to come back up. So we just got to weather this, tempest in the teapot created by the media, the same media that had no problem with and played down actually the inflation during the Biden era when it was really bad and was having a huge impact on people, and they felt it. Fortunately, they lost an election due to it in large part as well. Here's an interesting story out of Eugene. So in Eugene, there's a newspaper, a very liberal newspaper, that got somebody embezzled a whole bunch of money from it. Someone who worked for that newspaper for a while stole a whole bunch of money, nearly sent the paper into bankruptcy, and they barely pulled back from the brink. It's called the Eugene Weekly. And then the person that did this somehow managed to, before being caught, flee the jurisdiction of Oregon to, I think, Ohio. And the governor was refusing for a while to extradite this person back to Oregon. It required a formal request and that there is some kind of agreement that could be executed, but she wasn't doing it. Finally, she relented. I guess it was last week. But now she's at it again. And this one relates to a scam where a whole bunch of Asian American households in Eugene and Springfield were targeted. 17 were targeted and burglarized. And the person who has been, who's alleged to have done this, has also fled the state to the state of Texas. Now, what's different here is that the DA, Chris Peroza, who is a more of a pro law enforcement, tough on crime guy, they actually have that in Eugene, believe it or not, in Lane County. He's the county prosecutor. He was bewildered by why they weren't, why the governor wasn't cooperating with the extradition. And then when she didn't do it, she wouldn't explain why she wouldn't do it. And a very liberal person from the board of the Asian American Council of Oregon said that Asian business owners had no idea that they're even being targeted until it was too late. And it turns out that, let's see, there's one of the board members of this group, Jenny Jonak, is actually the chair of the Eugene 4J School Board. It's a super liberal person, super duper liberal. But now she's saying, we know that a crime is significant against, that crime is significant against Asian Americans, and we don't want to perpetuate the idea that no one's going to do anything about it or take it seriously. So they're all getting pretty ticked off at Tina Kotek, who is just won't move forward with this. However, apparently the story behind the story is that this fugitive is subject to an immigration and customs enforcement hold in Texas. So the person's in Texas. ICE, I guess, has this person, and now Kotek is getting all twisted up in her victim groups, because apparently she's describing, she's not deporting or not bringing this person to Oregon because it might actually involve a criminal who they want to protect from deportation. And but the DA in Lane County uh, is apparently, they're telling the DA in Lane County something else about the procedure they're going to follow. So it's confusing. And then there's some mealy mouthed rhetoric about feeling safe in their communities, and that crime that undermines public safety is unacceptable. But there's just a lot of confusion why the governor isn't doing this right away. And the Asian American community, I guess, is starting to find out that Tina Kotek has higher priorities than their safety. And so, and it's a multi-state burglary ring that was involved with this. And it even reached to the Tigard police have also arrested people there that are linked with this whole thing. So it's a big burglary ring, and Tina Kotek might have a political axe to grind that's preventing them from holding these guys accountable. Speaking of holding people accountable, apparently the Oregon Public Defense leader, he is the head of the Oregon Public Defense Commission. He said, and he unveiled a plan Monday to reduce the number of Oregonians that have been charged with a crime but do not have access to an attorney. A problem that they've thrown literally hundreds of millions of dollars additional at, only to see it get worse over the last 2 years. The last person that was in charge of this got fired in April, and her name, I don't remember, Jessica Camphy. And, she vowed to improve the whole thing. She took over in 2022, and it only got worse. So she got canned by Kotek and replaced by this new guy whose name is Ken Sachagrin. And they are admitting that it's gotten worse progressively over time. They said the crisis is largely driven by 6 counties: Coos, Douglas, Jackson, Marion, Multnomah, and Washington, with a disproportionate portion of the unrepresented individuals. Now, we don't know how many of those people are citizens or not. They don't say. But they're going to work on some idea called a restore court that will allow certain offenders with substance abuse issues to enter probation with treatment and options and bypass court. Sounds like this deflection stuff being put to work. They say they're going to form a nimble strike team that can be deployed to these counties that have a need. This entire thing is fraught with chaotic misinformation from the people who actually don't want to see criminals go to jail. They want to see them get released. And one of the ways to do that is to actually not solve this problem adequately, so that the courts order the local law enforcement to release these folks on their own recognizance, or just to drop the charges altogether. So this is Oregon for you. I'm sorry, but this is what's actually happening. And also an Oregon thing are clean energy policies. But apparently one of the unions, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 48, is getting ticked off at something known as the Power Act. It's House Bill 3546. He says instead of creating advanced solutions that build the grid and create jobs, it singles out data centers for new regulatory burdens not applied to other manufacturing sectors. Ironically, the technology companies behind these data centers have demonstrated real leadership in Oregon, he said, and nationally by investing in new wind and solar projects. Instead of rewarding this commitment to job creation and climate action, legislators are poised to add new costs and uncertainty for them. And so he's speaking out against this. I think this is left versus left violence. And yeah, if you come to Oregon and expect to be treated well, you're probably going to be punished for doing what they once said was the right thing. Shocking. No good deed ever goes unpunished, comes to mind when I hear this. Another piece of big news out of Salem is that we're getting near the end of the session, and it looks like there are some very large tax bills coming our way. And this is a problem because they plan to say that it's going to fund transportation. Their record shows that they raise taxes for transportation, including a big gas and road tax is what they're anticipating now. And in the past, they actually don't get all that work done. Billions never get spent, or costs get overrun and they never get around to doing it. So here's the taxes they want to raise. And this is straight from the Oregon watchdog, who's very good at kind of staying on top of these things and keeping us informed when we're going to find a hit to our pocketbooks. Specifically, a gas tax increase, probably 10%, 10 cents, I should say, 10 cents. And another is a mileage tax. This would tax vehicles based on mileage driven. There is an electric vehicle portion and a possible extension to all cars. So they're trying to get vehicles that aren't paying the gas tax. That's how they reward people for buying electric vehicles, is give them a new tax. A sales tax known as a vehicle transfer tax on all cars. So there is a privilege tax whenever you buy a new car, but now they want to add it so whenever any car is sold, they're going to impose a special sales tax on it. And then they're going to increase the DMV fees. Some fees will be increased by 100%. And I think I just got a renewal for registration for a car, one of my cars, and it's $190, I think. So will that increase 100%? That's a lot of money. One of the latest proposals they have, in addition to stealing the kicker, is they want to recreate the carbon tax program. They want to restructure the Kate Brown version by adding funding for wildfires and road projects while connecting to Washington State's cap and trade program. I can't think of a worse idea than to connect to somebody who's even loonier about climate alarmism and spending money on things that will never change the world's temperature. And there's still no official bill number on this huge transportation package that's supposed to amount somewhere between $1 and $1.8 billion. There's only 30 days left in the session. So stay tuned, watch for this, and be ready to jump on it and make your voice heard about this stuff, because we actually can move the needle on this. And if you want to hear the Senate Democrat leader's version of what he thinks is happening with no accountability, go ahead and listen to that. Senate President Rob Wagner is probably one of the biggest problems the state has right now, and he's going to make it worse with everything he's talking about doing. I think we covered a lot of these other stories I've got here. I do want to mention a story that's excellent from the Oregon Catalyst that talks about how Oregon might want to actually start following the lead of other liberal states, because many of those liberal states are doing things like slashing regulations, cutting taxes, like in the case of New York, and cutting off money benefits to illegal immigrants, which California has just done this. And the article's interesting. California, Illinois, and New York are big blue states. Meanwhile, Oregon seems to be doubling down on doing a lot of this stuff, and we should pay attention to that. Last two stories before I let you go here. One is there was a mass stabbing in Salem. Yes, a mass stabbing. There 11 victims were stabbed at Salem's Union Gospel Mission Men's Shelter. It's a homeless shelter, and um, the suspect was arrested, but a whole bunch of these guys got stabbed. And we should see how this story unfolds, because right now they're obviously not spending much time identifying who the perpetrator was, but apparently he just showed up, stayed there for one night, was preparing to stay another, and then just lost it and started taking it out on the people there, the other residents. And you'd think this would be a bigger story, but so far they're just acting like it's another day in urban camping land. And the Union Gospel Mission is one that's been trying to solve some of these problems, or at least provide care or address it, but you can see it's just a chronic mess. And it's not a mess you find in other states. I was just talking to Sunny Danforth earlier today, and she said, for instance, in a visit to Florida recently, it's like you don't see any of this, none of it. Lastly, there's a really big national news story that's just kind of hit that I wanted to bring to your attention. And it's about the Oregon high school championships here that I believe took place in Eugene. One of the competitions, there was a trans athlete who won 5th place in that competition, and the girls that he won 5th, and these girls, yes, I misgendered them. Oops. These girls are, yeah, I know, Lori, that some of those people that were stabbed are in critical condition. You know that if that were a MAGA person or somebody that hated homeless people or something or whatever, they'd be all over it and it'd be covered. But yeah, anyway, coming back to these girls, the girls that finished 3rd and 4th courageously refused to stand on the podium with this trans athlete. And they actually got interviewed by Fox News here, and you can watch the interview as well as what the former, the retired tennis legend Martina Navratilova, who stood up for these girls and said that that she's decrying that Democrats aren't doing enough to stand up for women and girls, and that female sports should just be for actual females. She said it. And she's kind of a liberal icon and has been for decades, but she's pushing back on this and really targeting the Democrats for making what she sees as just a completely foolish, um, foolish political decision in addition to a bad policy. But the high school senior and her fellow high school senior Alexa Anderson and her fellow female athlete Reese Eckhart, they stepped down from the podium, and they on the interview, what they say is, because they're track stars, they worked hard at this, and they had to compete against somebody who actually tied another girl for 5th place, who doesn't belong in this sport. And they said that they've just had enough. They've had enough of it, and they spoke out, and that's courageous because, as you know, the woke aristocracy in Oregon will come after them, and so will others. But I think, Riley Gaines really set the example on this. And thank you, Riley Gaines, for doing that, for telling the story, and then founding the Riley Gaines Center to help fight places that have this as a policy and allow this to happen. And as we saw just the other day in California, a nationally publicized incident involved a trans athlete in Yorupa Valley High School in California. This trans athlete won 2 state titles. And this is after President Trump warned the state not to let trans athletes compete in girls' state title meet. The Department of Justice is now giving California a deadline of June 9th to revise its policy or face federal funding cuts. And that could happen here in Oregon, obviously, too. In Washington, a trans athlete at East Valley High School won the girls' 400-meter 2A state title on Saturday. and multiple girls from Tumwater High School, which is at the center of a controversy involving a girls basketball player being reprimanded for refusing to face a trans opponent in the winter. They protested yesterday during school hours with a large banner and sign, "This is not a walkout. We're not going anywhere." The America First Policy Institute has filed a Title IX discrimination complaint against Oregon for its laws and that allow biological males to compete in girls' sports. This was filed on May 27th, so just last week. And the complaint has also been filed to the U.S. Department of Education Civil Rights Office, which has launched Title IX investigations into California, Minnesota, Maine, and Massachusetts. The head of the America First Policy Institute, Jessica Hart Steinman, said, every girl deserves a fair shot on the field, on the podium, and in life. When state institutions knowingly force young women to compete against biological males, they're violating federal law and sending a devastating message to female athletes across the country. Well, President Trump is pushing back. His administration, I think you're going to hear the name Harmeet Dillon on some of this stuff too, who's an assistant attorney general for civil rights, and Linda McMahon with the Department of Education. It's time that we put some teeth behind this policy and start fighting for girls and women in something that was specifically designed to protect women, not target them and denigrate the sports that they work so hard at competing in. Anyway, thanks all of you guys for being on tonight. I appreciate your viewership. And I want to ask you to share this with everyone you can, because there's folks that didn't hear any of this news, and they certainly didn't get to hear this kind of opinion, putting a framework around it here in Oregon. We're happy to do this, and obviously we'll continue doing it, but we would like to get more and more folks to see and hear this message. Anyway, have a great night. Tomorrow night, you should be Dawn, and I think Sunny as well, in the next episode of The Captive Audience. Have a great night, and keep fighting the